Hi, my name is Kersten from Kersten. We often get asked which is the right machine for my application. Well, as you can see, we've got a number of our power units here, together with the different attachments, and we've also got a surface which is quite varied. So we've picked a spot which is a little used car park, which really identifies some of the problems that you could face with maintaining and remedial work. So this car park, we have a south facing side and we have a north facing side. We can see that the north facing side is lined with trees, and those trees, one, are shading the area, and two, are dropping all of the material off the trees, like the leaves and the seeds, the birds are in the trees, etc., and they're dropping material down onto the surface, which then is sticking to the surface because the surface is staying damp. Now, as a maintenance contractor, you might think, well, okay, what we can do is just simply blow the material off and perhaps collect that up, and actually that's cured our problem. Well, on the south side, that's absolutely right. You can get away with just blowing the material off the surface onto perhaps a grass surface or a soil surface and using that as organic material. But on the north surface, when you blow it, because of the material, the surface is staying damp, the material is sticking to the surface, and you're not getting that same clean blow that you would on the drier south side. So we can demonstrate that. Got a blower here. Looks better? It's not right though, is it? It doesn't look like that surface because you've always still got all this moss growing in the surface, leaves, and you try to stuck to the surface. So we've just blown off this bay of the car park, and we can see that we've got some moss covered areas which have stayed damp. We can see we had some rain overnight, and we can see the rest of the car park is fairly dry, but where the moss is, it remains damp. Now, our options perhaps might be to spray this surface to get rid of the moss. Let's put our glyphosate down there, and we can turn our green moss into brown moss, into dead moss. But that moss will stay there. It's still there. It's not been removed. And the problems of the moss remain. Although we might have brown moss instead of green moss, the problems are here. So let's have a look at what the problems are. Moss is growing in the cracks or in the crevasses which are in between the stones. So if we get the moss, we've just blown this surface off, we can see that the moss is full of water, very damp to the touch. You could almost squeeze that out. So we've blown the surface off, but it's not blown that moss off because the moss is now connected to the surface. Now what we find is that, well, that's fine this time of the year. It's not doing any harm. Why don't we just leave it alone? Now in the winter, this moss is also holding the water in exactly the same way. But when we get a frost, when this surface freezes, or when the water in the moss freezes, the frozen water then expands, and where it's between these stones, it pushes the stones, dislodges them from the tarmac bonding. So we can feel I've just got one up with me nail there. So there's another stone out of this surface. Now that's created a larger crevice in the surface.
so we can have more material sitting in there, we can have more water sitting in there, so the next time we get a freeze, that pushes more stones out of the surface. Now that freeze-thaw effect damages tarmac on a regular basis.
We bought here today some various machines from Kersten. We've bought the pedestrian machines, we do tractor mounted machines, but in essence each attachment does a similar job, whether they're tractor mounted or pedestrian. And you think, well, what's the difference between a sweeper with a white brush in it, or a yellow brush, or a weed brush, or a gulley brush? A sweeper is a sweeper, right? Well, no, not quite. If you imagine using a yard broom inside your kitchen, or a little dustpan and brush outside in a farmyard, you can just start to imagine what the different effects of these two things might be. A stiff broom, a soft broom. Well, it's exactly the same effect when you use it out here in a car park. First of all, we have the K2100 Power Unit with our standard white 5-row combi brush. We have a similar K2100 Power Unit with our 90cm DMOS 90 brush. We then have a K1500 with our WB40 weed brush. And then we have another attachment that we're going to fit onto the K1500, which is our same 5-row combi brush with a collector box and a gulley brush. Now, as you recall, we've blown the material off the one surface already, and what we're going to do is blow the other two surfaces so they're all the same, and then we're going to use each machine in each one of these parking bays and try and demonstrate to you what the difference is between the effect of the three different machines. Each machine will do a bit of what the other machine will do, but each machine will do a slightly different job. So you can get away with one machine, but you might be better off with more than one attachment to get a perfect job or to cover a multitude of scenarios. So I'm going to ask Trevor to come in with the blower and blow off these three bays so that they're all similar, so that you can see the difference. Come on, Trev. So now we've blown the surfaces off, we've revealed what detritus we've got sticking to the surface. We've got a mixture of moss and algae, and then the seeds and leaves and the organic material which has rotted down, which has formed essentially soil. And it's this soil that we need to get out of the surface so that the surface stays dry. After it rains, it dries out very, very quickly instead of staying wet all the time and allowing this material to grow, the moss and algae to grow and weeds to grow in the surface. So we're going to start off with the K1500, with the K2100, with the sweeper brush. We've angled the head to the side and we're going to sweep all of the debris to one side so you can see how much material each machine is getting out of the surface. Over to you, Trent. We'll put the gulley brush, the front brush guard on the front of the machine to keep material down on the floor rather than it going up in the air.
remedial operation. We want to set the machine that's going nice and slowly so it gets a chance of getting into the surface and getting the material out. If we were just using the sweeper as a maintenance machine, we could go quite quickly over the surface, perhaps collect the material, perhaps with a gulley brush, and just perform its maintenance task. We've done the first row, and we've got a reasonable amount of material off the surface over and above what has been blown off. Some of the loose stones on the surface being swept up. You notice we're causing no damage to the white lines. So that's the first machine. Now we can see that there's still traces of moss on the surface, but it's got a substantial amount of material out. And it's all quite light, wet, soil type material. Okay, so we move on to the second machine, which is a DMOS 90 brush on a K2100. We can see that we've now got a much thicker bristle on this brush, and this one is made of nylon. So it's a much higher quality plastic grade than the polypropylene, a bit more expensive than the polypropylene, and we're using a smaller diameter brush and a slightly narrower brush. So we've got a 90 centimetre here, and we've got a 100 centimetre there. That's 37 centimetres in diameter, and this is 32 centimetres in diameter. So we've got more of a mechanical advantage on the bristles here. They're much stiffer, so we can have more power to get into the surface, and we require more power. We're using the K2100 to drive the brush. We've got far less deflection on the brush, so we've got something more akin to your yard brush here compared with your soft brush over here. So let's see what difference this machine will make compared with the standard 5-row combi brush. So similar setup with a brush guard in front with the brush angle.
we can see here now is that we've been left with a slightly drier surface than we have with the first brush. So the first brush has smeared the soil material more onto some more of the stones than it was originally on. Whereas the second brush, because it's got a stiffer bristle, it has flicked the material off the stones far more positively. So we've not got the smearing that we've got on the first brush. We've got a little bit more of the moss out from between the joints because it's positively flicked it from the top, but it's probably not penetrated into the surface particularly well because we've now got bristles which are 3mm in diameter, and so it's probably going to skate more over the top. However, if you've got the material on the top, it will get that material very effectively because the bristles aren't deflecting. You're using absolutely the end of the bristles, you've got no deflection there, so the material can't help but to get flicked out and it's been rode up. So if we look at the volume of material that we've got at the end of these two, we've got the least amount of material swept off the surface with the softer brush. We've got more material swept off the surface with the DMOS 90 brush. So we've got a drier and cleaner and less mossy surface. So let's have a go with the weed brush and see what effect we get now. The weed brush is a different operation, and of course we're now using a 40cm brush compared with a 90cm or 1m brush. The brush has got wire bristles on it and is working in the vertical axis. To get some sort of width of working, Trevor's oscillating the machine from side to side. You could just run it up and down forward, but by side to side operation you're attacking the material in different directions. We can also see that the weed brush on the right hand stroke is more aggressive than the left hand stroke, and that's because of the effect of the caster wheel in the centre. So he's using the left hand stroke as a clearing stroke and the right hand stroke as an action stroke and getting the material out of the surface. We can adjust the weed brush for angle, for tilting forwards and aft, to try and for height we can adjust to try and get the most appropriate angle and depth for the surface we're trying to tackle. We can see that it's not damaging the surface in any way. But the work rate obviously isn't as high as the sweeper brushes.
what little effort it's taking Trevor to operate this machine. The machine's doing all the work. He's got the control set so that it's just moving forward very slowly. That's the benefit of hydraulic control, complete control over your speed and how the machine operates. Okay, so now we've got the Weedbrush section complete. Obviously we haven't got a sweeper to sweep all of the material to one side. So in this case we could either blow it. It blows very, very easily because now it's very friable material. But what we want to show you is how much material there is there. So we're quickly going to collect this material and put it in a windrow in the same way as the others. So we're out here cleaning the car park, and we've just done a bay on this north facing side with the weed brush. Now we want to be able to sweep that material up. Now the job we have now, really, instead of being a remedial work action, we're now looking at a maintenance action, because hopefully when we sweep surfaces regularly they will only have light loose debris which is on the surface, and not, as we've just been working on, ingrained material that has got into the surface. So we're going to swap the show the benefits of the Kersten two-wheel tractor, and we're going to swap the weed brush for the sweeper. So you could buy one machine which then could be used for the two different actions. So off you go then, Trev. So first of all we're going to disconnect the centre pivot and then the two hydraulic couplings. And then we're going to put the stand down on the
just come off. This is Kersten.
So we're not going to put the stand down, we're just going to disconnect it from the attachment. Join it onto the sweeper. Click over the securing latch. Okay, so now we have the result of our 3 tests. If you remember, we did the first test with our normal 5-row combi brush, this first bay. We did the second bay with our DMOS 90 brush, and we did the third bay with the Kersten weed brush attachment. The results sort of speak for themselves. We've got a surface here which has got rid of the majority of the stuck down material, but we've got some of it slightly smeared over the surface. The second bay, we've got no smearing over the surface, but it's not got all of the material out from between the stones. And the third bay, I would say, is almost perfect. So the weed brush has done a stunning job. It's got all of the material out, and we went over with the Weedbrush attachment first of all, and then we went over with the sweeper with the collector on, and that's all the material that it's got out of this area. So we can see that with the first one we've got the least amount of material collected. The second one we've got much more material collected in the row, and then the third one we've got the maximum amount of material collected, and we collected it in the collector box. We're now going to do a second part over the second lay with the moss brush. What the second part is. With the DMOS 90 brush, we're getting 80% as good a finish as we are with the Weedbrush. So the difference between the standard combi row brush, we would say, is more your maintenance machine. It does a little bit of moss removal. The DMOS 90 does less maintenance and a lot more remedial work, and it's almost comparable with a Weedbrush in certain situations, but of course, being 90 centimeters wide, it's a lot quicker than the Weedbrush. It's also got the poly bristle on it rather than the Weedbrush using the wire bristle. So effectively, we've got a reasonable finish with the combi brush, a pretty good finish with the DMOS, an almost perfect finish with the most amount of material collected with the Weedbrush and sweeper combination. So we can see now the different surfaces from a different angle, and we can see the surface with the Weedbrush, how quickly that surface has dried up compared with the sweeper's surfaces with the DMOS 90 and the swept surface with the standard 5-row combi brush. We can see on this surface now we've cleared out all of this material. If we have a little close-up of it, we can see the crevasses where stones have come out of the surface, which have been loosened by the freeze-thaw effect, and where the surface is now damaged. Now, if we don't maintain this surface, these crevasses will get larger and larger, and the water will sit in there more, and then when we get freeze thaw, we get more stones being pushed out of the surface. It's the natural erosion effect. Nature gave us this effect. So to combat this, the answer is to sweep a surface on a regular basis, especially surfaces which are north facing, which are underneath trees where you've got all this detritus falling on. Another key maintenance task is maintaining the trees. If you want to maintain your surfaces and the integrity of the surfaces, you've got to keep them clean. So either sweep them up on a regular basis or restrict the amount of material which is falling on them. I appreciate that we want more nature, we want more trees, but also we need to preserve the infrastructure that we've built. If we don't preserve that, we use more carbon replacing it and renewing it. So let's maintain, let's have the trees in the right place, let's have the hard surfaces in the right place so that we humans can operate, and then maintain each in their individual place. I hope you found this interesting. Stay tuned for the next one.